We chatted about having you be our guest today. We talked about what you're working on and non-invasive, and there's so many topics that you could cover, and we settled on non-invasive. But if you would, tell us a little bit about what you're working on day to day, and if it happens to be the non-invasive data collection part, then take it away out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. And again, please accept my apologies for the late arrival. Being brought up in a military family, if you're 5 minutes early, you're late. So anyway, my name's Rienzo. I'm leading a early stage company called One Health Group, and One Health is focused on that, the intersection of animal and human health and environmental variables. We're leading with professional animal health solutions first. It's actually harder than the human side, other than on the human, of course, there's a lot more in the way of regulation. But to collect the data off of animals is more challenging. And then we'll eventually move our same technology, probably out about year 4. Once we release our solution to market for animal, we'll then introduce for human. And again, same technology foundation that I'll talk a little bit about. And then what we'll do is we will actually fuse the data sets. And we have some different machine learning algorithms where we're predicting the onset of events before they actually occur in the animal. So one example would be, we did a study, a fairly large animal study with Cornell University College of Veterinary Medicine. And we were predicting the onset of osteoarthritis in the canines almost a year in advance of any of the symptoms showing up. And we did 2 studies similarly with drug studies with Zoetis, that we were doing the same thing, showing that certain drugs, instead of being almost prescribed as a hospice drug, with 53 to 60 days of life left with the animal, they could be prescribing it almost 18 months in advance and giving the animal better quality of life. So what we use is primarily ultra-wideband radar. And we use ultra-wideband radar in the 3.7 gigahertz range. And we also use other sensors. So what we can do through our sensor platform, so this is an example. This is a flex rigid circuit. You know, it folds, battery goes in the middle. This can also run off of wall power, but these are little verticals, ceramic white looking verticals, or ultra-wideband radar antennas. And then it gets packaged in something this weighs about an ounce. It's pretty small. And our go-to-market version is even smaller and lighter. But we have other sensors in there that allows us to tell what the animal's doing at the time we collect the data. Now, something that's important to know is we can attach to a collar, we could attach to a harness. We don't care what the species or breed is. We could go on to a bridle of a horse. It could be incorporated in the animal's environment, so we don't ever have to touch the animal. We never have to be next to their skin. So it's almost like, you know, for old guys like me, the old Star Trek, where they would scan them and get all their health data. That's sort of what this is like. And so with that sensor package, we collect about 4 billion samples a second of anatomical, functional, physiologic, and contextual information. And then we do a little pre-processing on that sensor. We send it to the cloud where predictive analytics work on it, and it can also be displayed in a cloud-based dashboard and that the professional can use. And then we also put it on a mobile app. One other thing I'll bring up before I get a little bit more into the tech, we have something called care flows. And a care flow, there's about 20 of them. It might be something like general health and wellness monitoring. It could be something like pain management, weight management, cardiovascular management. That determines what sensors are fired, how often, and when does the data go to the cloud. It also sets thresholds based on species, breed, age, weight, and sex of the animal. And that also helps inform the algorithm. So the sensor is programmable over the air. Those can be updated on the fly. The professional can actually update their own care flow. They can create their own, or they can modify it one and save it and do their own regimen. So sort of the beauty of the tech is we collect clinically actionable data, so we compare it to industry gold standards, and we get things such as heart rate, rest rate, heart rate variability, blood pressure, core body temperature. We get pulmonary function, We can tell you if there's fluids in the lungs. We can actually tell you if there's a mass in the body that doesn't belong there, and many other things. And that gets surrounded by context. What was the animal doing? Were they running? Were they sleeping? Were they laying on this side? You know, what were they doing at the time we collected it? And then we use that to inform the professional. And so on this current technology, we have about 70 patents already issued in the, you know, the broadest sense on, you know, utility and design patents. And we've gone through a number of studies. So for instance, we did a study with Johns Hopkins University. We won a grant where we were monitoring lung cancer tumors during radiotherapy. And we could tell you where the tumor was located, its motion, its shape, feed that back to the linear accelerator in less than a second, and they could adjust the beam to keep it 100% on the tumor. And the beauty of that was it cut the time in half. So you could get double the throughput on the linear accelerator, less time in the accelerator for the patient. We presented at the American Association of Physicists in Medicine and won the most novel technology to impact radiation oncology. We also did a human study where we were monitoring babies in the womb, and we could see their heart rate, rest rate, get their blood pressure, see their motion, separated out from the mothers. But the real point of the study was we only put about 1/500th the energy into the body that your typical smartphone does. So it's very safe technology. And then this is another example. This is a PCB-based ultra-wideband radar antennas, receive and transmit antennas. There's a little bit of circuitry on the back. We actually embedded this in a Merck pharmaceutical study with automated feeders and watering systems. And when the animal, and of course it had a control board coupled with this, but when the animal would come over to feed or drink without ever touching the animal, we could collect their vital signs. So we were actually embedded in that feeding system, and then we could collect that data. We can even tell you how many times they chewed and when they swallowed their food and things of that nature, which is pretty neat. And so you can imagine you could apply that to dairy cattle, or you could apply it to clinical research organizations where you're monitoring rodents in a cage. There's all sorts of different applications. So this same tech can end up being used for humans. And I apologize sort of for the long ramble. I thought about putting up slides, and I thought, everybody
We don't need
gets bored with
slides, but let me ask you,
Yep.
who's your primary user?
That's a really tough question, Joe. So we have multiple.
That's the start of a strategy, right? I mean,
Well, our first,
without knowing who's going to buy it.
well, yes, our first go-to-market is primarily veterinarians. However, we're already in discussions with a very large clinical research organization. We're getting ready to do primate studies as well as rat studies for them. But it's the same tech. And matter of fact, the press release should go out next week. We just signed a very large exclusive distribution deal with a Japanese, multi-billion-dollar Japanese pharmaceutical company for exclusivity in Japan, and they also invested in the company. But they're going to use it for horses, Wagyu beef, which is really big in Japan, of course. So there's all these different applications. So anywhere, typically, there's a professional touch point, a veterinarian, a caretaker like a rancher, for instance. That's where we fit. A handler like service animals, guide dogs for the blind, military animals, Department of Homeland Security animals. This all fits. So one type of technology hits all those different market verticals, and there's multiple use cases within the different market verticals. So
tell me about the primate study. How would that work? Using your tech, they're looking at what?
So these are typically drug, they're doing studies for different drug companies, this particular CRO. And so what they would do is they would embed our sensor. In this particular instance, they use primate jackets. There are other CROs that don't use primate jackets. They use primate collars. In this particular instance, the sensor would be embedded in the primate jacket. And depending upon what the drug is that they're testing, we're helping to collect that safety and efficacy data from them. So if it's sort of a cardiopulmonary drug, let's say, we would be monitoring, the heart rate, rest rate, blood pressure, lung function, heart wall thickness, ejection fraction, cardiac volume, things of that nature. And we could feed that to them in real time. It's also great because you don't have to have a technician there or a veterinarian there that actually agitates the heck out of the animal. And the primates are pretty smart. They'll turn their backs to people when they come in and try to collect data. They try not to handle them, so we can do this all non-invasively. And today, a lot of those have implantable telemetry monitors. So you're putting the animal at risk. There's greater recovery time. None of that's required with what we would do. So that's how it works in a primate sort of setting.
And rat, same thing?
Yeah, so rats, typically 2 rats in a cage, can be 5 mice in a cage, for instance. In this study, they're going to do a couple rats in a cage, multiple cages of 2. The sensor obviously doesn't go on the rat, but it can go on a rodent pad underneath the cage, or the sensor can actually be on top of the cage, or you can put it on the side if you want to. And the thing that they primarily look for in those studies is the rat's behavior. So is the rat lethargic? Is it hyperactive? Is it following its normal routine of sort of eating and drinking? Does it get more aggressive? Does it sleep longer? And since we're obviously not putting a sensor on the animal, the accelerometer and gyro don't do us any good, but ultra wideband radar is great at motion down to even a sub-millimeter. So we can monitor the rodent or rodents in a cage to collect that information without ever touching them. Now, most laboratory animals are chipped, and so we can pick up which animal we're looking at. But let's say the animal is not chipped. We actually have a patent on how we collect a digital signature off the animal. So once we get a baseline on an animal, we can tell you which animal we're looking at, even if they're not chipped. It's almost like a fingerprint for the animal. So that's how we work with rats.
Let me ask if there's a question. I'm seeing a few nods and anyone have a comment for Al?
Have I bored you to death?
I actually work with a company that creates equipment for monitoring animals, and it's really difficult to get consistent data from them. So this is fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Yes. So, we, even though we're the innovators, we do have a chief veterinary officer. We work with the veterinarians at different colleges of veterinary medicine and elsewhere to do studies. Matter of fact, we recently won an AKC grant with Ohio State University College of Veterinary Medicine and Georgia Tech. And we've applied for an NSF one now. But yeah, this is great because no surgical implant. You don't have to touch the animal. You don't have to shave the animal. And that's why I said it's actually harder on the animal side than it is dealing with on the human side. I mean, you could drop this in a coat pocket. It could go on a handheld instrument. It really depends on what you want to monitor. Now, we can go wall power too. So in the laboratory settings, they're typically running off of wall power because they always want this on to monitor those animals. But in other settings, like a veterinary clinic, we actually have a wand almost. You could say that looks a little bit like a barcode scanner that you never have to put it on the animal. You just put the wand up to the region of interest on the animal. So it helps to, keep it so it's not too nerve-wracking for the animals in clinic. And they almost never collect blood pressure on animals, companion animals. When you take your cat or dog to a clinic, it's very difficult. And they get white coat hypertension just like us. So there's a lot of cool applications. I don't know if you're aware, just sort of a sidebar, 2 years ago, there was almost 60 million egg-laying chickens in the United States that were euthanized. And of course, everybody's egg prices went through the roof. And because what happens is, avian flu or some sort of lung function disorder, happens, and it goes rampant because a lot of these things are multi-story. And the chickens are housed very close together. And with this, we don't have it set to go yet, but probably a year from now, we're working with a egg laying provider. They have a 3-story facility that has over 10 million chickens in it, and they want to put these on the side of the cages to try to monitor the health the egg layers. And if they see that there's an infection, or if they see that there's something going on, they can quickly pull that chicken from the facility, you know, separate it out, have the vets check it out. But to try to stop that huge, euthanizing the animals. So there was one facility alone in Ohio that had to euthanize over 7 million chickens. So not only does it disrupt the food supply and, you know, economics, it's an issue, of course, but all the animals, suffering and the loss of the animals.
David?
For a great discussion now. The applications seem, I don't know, infinity, you know, and good for you. But can you talk a little bit, or will you talk a little bit about the regulatory hurdles and implications? I know you're not in humans yet, but animals have regulation. I thought you were going to go to racehorses, and I think the regulations must be outrageous in that environment, but you stayed away. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your question. So we have done equine studies, but, you know, for the most part, what I should say, we're going to go to market through strategics, distribution street. We are going to have a small business development and sales force, but I have no interest in building a huge sales force and having, create all those channels and so forth. So we're working with, like, the Mercks of the world, the Zoetis, the Purinas, and so forth. There are a lot of regulations, but more so when it comes to feed animals, and that's going to enter into the food stream, whether it's producing milk or whether it's feedstock, pig, cattle, chicken. It doesn't make any difference. That's where there's a lot of regulations around this. So you do have to show that you're truly collecting information that is clinically actionable and compares to gold standards. We do have an injectable sensor also that collects things like SpO2, core body temp, and some other things. It's very small, similar to a RFID chip you'd see go into a cat or a dog. Those have to be removed before anything goes to processing, even though they're incredibly small. But those actually have to be taken out of the animal. But when it comes to the primary work we do, let's say for the companion animals, there's almost no regulation, because we're not putting radiation into the body. We're not putting a topical on the skin. There's no drugs that are being used. So all we have to satisfy is the federal communications to show that our ultra-wideband radar is not interfering with any other signals, and other signals don't interfere with us. And the beauty of ultra-wideband radar, it's below the noise floor. So, if you think of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and Zigbee and so forth, they're up here. Ultra-wideband radar is down below, so it doesn't get disrupted. Laboratory animals, we do have to be good laboratory practice compliant. So if it's going to truly be used in a study where that data is going to be used, for releasing a drug or whatever, a topical or a nutraceutical or so forth, we have to be GLP compliant. We won't be on introduction to the market. That comes about 6 to 9 months after, and that's a part of working that study with that clinical research organization I was talking about. But regulations, and then UL for the plug-in when we do wall power. So it's pretty minimal. Going to human, it is a 510K solution, and which is pretty nice. The FDA does have some guidelines on ultra-wideband radar. It depends on the frequency that you're at. Because ultra-wideband can be sort of down to from 2.1 to 10.4, 10.5 gigahertz. But we only operate at half the legal limit. And actually, humans are better at dissipating the energy than animals are. And so the worst you sort of get, if you were to leave this on all the time, run it sort of full power, you would feel like you had a heating pad on your skin if you were to break the legal limits, from the FDA. But again, we don't do that. So moving to humans should be relatively easy.
Do you have a timeline for FDA for 510K, or is that in the future for you?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a product roadmap and a technology roadmap that goes out several years, 6, 7 years. We show introducing a human about year 4. So this doesn't go to market until the first half of 2025. We're in test, with different clinics. and then we're doing our final release. So probably a few years after this releases to animal, do we go to human?
Our next question comes from fan favorite Andre Domino. He's speaking next week about a product that he brought to market for animals. Andre?
Okay.
Exactly, Albert. That's why it was interesting what you're talking about. We have a non-invasive electrotherapy device that's used to treat musculoskeletal pain in canine and equine. And, the results have been excellent. We did clinical studies and so forth. But the clinical studies were, of course, relied on radiographic analysis as well as also, gait analysis and things like that, a number of subjective things. But now coming to market, I'm wondering if your technology can give us other parameters to show the improvement, as opposed to, kind of testing that's done afterwards, if there's something that can be done on a real-time basis.
Yeah, that's a great question, and good for you for what you're doing. That's outstanding. We with that Cornell study I mentioned on the osteoarthritis, I can't tell you that we can truly quantify the pain, that the animal's experiencing, but what we would see in sort of those early indicators, we would see changes in the animal's behavior, how their sleep patterns, how they would sleep, especially with cats. They would try sort of draw closer to areas where it's warmth, sun coming in a window, laying on one side or another, or hesitation for the animal before to make a certain move. And then so you could see changes in gait, things of that nature. But also what was interesting, when those occurred, when they make certain motions, you'd find spikes, very, very rapid spikes in heart rate and respiration rate. Because they were experiencing pain. And
Right.
Most animals are pretty good at masking pain, and they try not to sort of show that pain. But those are some of the things on how we were providing that information. And then we could see, actually we did a drug study too with Zoetis, and a food study, osteoarthritis food study with Purina. And so we were monitoring how much did the drug help, because we could see, were they experiencing some of those same issues that they were before, or how much did the food, which was primarily omega-3s and so forth, but how much problems did they, could we mitigate with our solution, or detect with our solution? So we don't have any therapies like you do. I mean, I do know of some who are playing with stimulating the vagus nerve to potentially help with the pain and so forth that the animals are experiencing. But we're pretty much on the diagnostic side. But there might be some opportunities. Like I said, we're looking at gait analysis and things of that nature too.
Well, I guess the deeper question I have is do you get the results on a real-time basis as opposed to, collecting it and then reviewing it afterwards? Because, for example, in our device, there's an immediate response, and you could see it, for example, a dog with hip dysplasia will actually get up after the treatment. The question is there any way to quantify that on a real-time basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to those care flows. So we have a care flow that is hard real time. And we do that because anesthesiologists and some others in the surgery suites want to have the data streaming, and they don't want to have to shave the animal or have an ECG jacket on them or whatever the case may be. So we do have a care flow that allows the data to stream in real time. You could offload it to a computer if you want. You could have it go to your phone, or you could have it go to the cloud. So it really depends on what you want to do and how long you need to collect that data. We can do hard real-time streaming probably for about 2 days is max. And then other care flows don't take as much, and you could go about 21 days before you'd have to charge it, unless you're on wall power.
Well, I'm very intrigued by the potential synergy, so I'd love to speak to you about this afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to have the conversations.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, you had a question in the comments.
Well, I was just curious, have you done some dairy cow work already?
No, we haven't done dairy cow. It's interesting because the dairy cows, they want this embedded in the milking machine environment. So when they're there, and what's also interesting with the dairy cows, they want more trend data than looking for acute sorts of things. So we haven't done dairy cows. We have looked at cattle feedstock, but it's a little bit different because they want the cow wearing this versus the non-contact like the dairy cattle. But that's definitely in the queue. Actually, the production animal business is huge, and it's probably the largest of all the market verticals, but it also has the most use cases. Almost every corporate that you talk to has a different sort of scenario and way they want to work this. We have had some discussions with URUS. They have about 50 million plus feedstock under management. And they said, hey, we want this on the time of calving until they go to processing, and then they take it and go to the next calf, so forth, get to continue to reuse it. But then I've had others who said, I don't care about that. We just want to see when they're out, sort of being fattened up and the cowboys riding the range. We just want to see those that we ought to call out of the herd because their the behavior is not quite right. They're not interested in heart rate and blood pressure and those sorts of things. So it was more activity.
We have a large population also of turkeys in Minnesota, and I've talked with an interesting little company that has developed a robot that goes in the flock to manage it. Yeah. And I think they would be very interested in this kind of functionality. Maybe you could partner with someone like that. I think you're also good to connect with the feed people because, well, finding someone who has the interest in the performance from a consumable, that's kind of a good place to be.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I appreciate that. And again, always happy to have the conversations. If you look at a lot of the really, the substantial herds and so forth, I can't speak intelligently to turkeys, but with cattle, they're trying to deploy drones and other things now to see, how the cattle are behaving. But, anytime, you're trying to stream video, it's a lot of data. You've got to have somebody on the other end looking at the video and so forth. And we're trying to say, hey, look, this can be done non-invasively, and we send an alert. Now the thing I want to make sure I'm not misleading anybody with, we've got to be within about a foot from the animal. If you want to penetrate the body and get that, heart wall motion, ejection fraction, lung fluid, stuff like that. If all you want is heart rate or rest rate and heart rate variability, and some of the motion, like activity, then I could probably be about 10 feet away. So it really depends on what you're wanting to collect.
But they did just euthanize millions of turkeys with the avian flu just recently. If you have a marker of that, temperature or behavior or something, it could be crucial for their operation.
Yeah, I hear you. We do collect core body temperature. The problem is I have to be pretty close to the animal because we're interpreting the microwave energy that comes off the animal. So, you've got to be very close because there's so much background noise when you're not touching the animal. And also microwave, the best signal for microwave thermometry also happens to be right where Wi-Fi is at, so it's sort of a sweet spot for Wi-Fi. So if you got a lot of stuff in the area, it's tough pulling the signal out. But we primarily in those settings are looking at fluids in the lungs. And so we're trying to see, is there starting to be a buildup in fluids in the lung, or is the expansion and contraction of the lungs changing? So we sort of look at that pulmonary function because we can pick those types of things up as well.
Al, is OHG Corp your best email address?
Excuse me, yeah. So Albert.DiRienzo@OHG Corp.
I just shared it to everybody, and I also put in Andres, and I also put in Mark, since they both expressed interest in potential partnership opportunities with you.
Yeah,
So if you want to copy that'd be one less step for me after the call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your?
Yes, thank you. Just maybe a dumb question. Can this technology be utilized for in agriculture? So I know there's a lot of robotic agriculture going on, and when you mentioned a robot in the turkeys, it kind of stimulated my idea of a lot of these automated things going on in agriculture. And could you measure plant health, for example, or something of that nature?
Yeah, I can't intelligently answer that question. So there's a lot of things that we can do with ultra wideband radar. A lot depends on the frequency that we're operating at, and power available and so forth. We can, there's things that we can actually detect in the blood. So if you're looking to get, but I will tell you, as a single receive and transmit antenna, because we try to keep the cost of goods cheap, you can't get the resolution that you really need to see some of the things that you might want to at the, maybe microscopic level. Now, that said, we do have some patents where we can actually have a phased array, a linear array of these antennas. We can do beam steering, wherever you want to look on the animal. Of course, you can do it in real time. And then what I particularly like is we also can do synthetic aperture radar, where we're sweeping the beam across a region and then reconstructing what we just saw. And they come with pros and cons. All of them do. Whether it's cost or any more back-end computing power or whatever the case may be. But I think with time, something like that could certainly be tested out. Like I said, we can pick up glucose levels in blood. And so there's been some interesting studies that have come out of other universities around the world on detecting other sorts of measurements within humans. I haven't come across a whole lot in plants. What I can tell you is we know in a human or an animal what we're looking at, because every part of the body has a unique dielectric reflection. So if we interrogate, the liver, it has a unique reflection. So we know we're looking at the liver, and then we have 256 range bins. So it's like slices into the body. So we know where we're at in the body, where's the strongest signal, the weakest signal, we can see the motion. I would imagine there's, so we can see fat, muscle, a blood vessel, whatever the case may be. I suspect you could do something similar for plants. But, like with us, for our algorithms and stuff to work, we already have over 1 million hours of animal data. And, so it takes a long time to get those sort of those machine learning algorithms, to where they're valuable. But I don't know. It would be an interesting problem. I actually have, like, even the Brady Institute wanting to know if we can detect people carrying weapons without ever touching them. So could, without going through a scanner, could a policeman on the street or could a soldier going into a volatile area determine if somebody was carrying a weapon before they ever approach them? And ultra wideband radar can do that, not at the frequencies we operate, but that's where it started. When you look at through the wall radar, and you can see people on the backside of a wall, or if you think about getting somebody out of an avalanche or buried under rubble from an earthquake, it's ultra wideband radar at a much higher power and frequency than what we use. But that's, there's some pretty cool applications.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jan? Jan?
Did you say me? Sorry, I have to, since I'm a packaging engineer, I have to ask packaging questions. How are you shipping this, and what is the sensitivity of your product? And do you have batteries in it, or chips or something that can vibrate loose? So I'm just wondering how you're getting them to your customers so they actually function properly.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So this
have to
little,
interrupt just because of the way you modified that. How are you shipping this to customers so that they function properly? It's how your customers function properly. That is quite
the
an
product,
achievement.
sorry.
oh man, that's bad, Joe.
That's the grammarian in me, sorry.
So in this version of the sensor, so not only is it injection molded on the outside, it also is injected with a low pressure molding. So all the electronics, the battery, everything is surrounded in this low pressure molding. This has an IP68 rating. You can go below 6-7 feet of water for over an hour, no problem. You can beat the thing with a hammer. It keeps functioning because the animal world is very rough. The things are abused. And so, and when you think of temp, the humidity and so on and so forth, we're like mil spec equivalent. And so we can get these to the customer without much issue. As far as the actual packaging, it depends on the customer. Like the veterinarians want an internal package that can be reused over and over and over again, because they send these home with the pet parent to monitor maybe post-surgery. And then it comes back to the vet. This gets cleaned. They can wash it with soapy water, use disinfectants on it, whatever they want to do. It can't go in an autoclave, but any sort of the chemicals they use, and then it would be repurposed for the next one. So that's sort of how we avoid issues. This has been modeled, and I can't even remember. It used to be Rottweiler. Now there's another breed of dog that even has a stronger bite strength. But this has been modeled to those bite strengths. And just gone through all sorts of shock testing and so forth.
And it's got batteries in it, or?
It does have a battery in it. You know, when it dies, which we're seeing, you know, testing the battery life, of course, it's based on charge cycles, but it's about 5 years out. We've had some of these running for more than 5 years in the field, but they can send them back and we can dispose of them.
So
You
it's
know, or
lithium
the-
ion, so you have to worry about how many you ship at a time.
Yeah,
Okay, so different thing. It's not polypropylene.
no,
Good, okay. Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
just trying to understand how it's all working together and you make sure it doesn't break apart. So you've got the monitor there, but the equipment that reads it is your phone, or you're doing other types of things?
yeah, it could be a phone, it could be a laptop or a tablet or a desktop, you know, because you can pull the data. We have open APIs, so if you don't want to use
Okay.
our cloud-based dashboard, you can pull it down to your own system, you know, the data, because they pay for the sensor and then they pay a monthly fee for access to all the data, the alerts, the dashboard, and predictive analytics and so forth.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sharing on my screen. This may be a field, but I'm friendly with the group that started this company. They're out of New Zealand,
Okay.
and they are not non-invasive, but their concept is it just so happens that his brother was a vet and
Okay.
would have lots of animals in kennels, and it would be hard to monitor
Yeah,
all of them. And this was a way to use Bluetooth to monitor everybody. So I
right.
don't know if this is at all relevant for you, if this is an introduction you would find valuable. But I could arrange that if that was
Yeah,
something.
yeah, certainly. I'm all, you know, we're a bunch of not invented here guys. And so I'm always happy to have the conversations to figure out what the best possible scenario is. We're just trying to get something out to market that'll help solve problems and be used. And you know, we all make money in the process of doing that.
So 5 years from now, your dreams are realized, and what do we have?
You know, my dream is to really see this in the animal and human world, and then merging that data to try to come up with new predictive analytics or new personalized sort of care regimes or regimens. The reason I say that is if you think of infectious disease, about 7 out of every 10 infectious diseases starts in animals, makes the leap to human, right? The zoonotic diseases, if you think of environment, you know, it's gone up tenfold over the past couple decades. Vector-borne diseases, you know, things from fleas, mosquitoes, ticks, and so forth. So it's really merging this and determining what is the best for both the animal and human, because the
Among larger publicly traded companies, who would make the best strategic partners for you?
You know, some of the ones we're talking to today, of course, a number of them I can't mention, but certainly a Merck, because Merck plays in both the animal and human world. They've already done 2 paid proof of concepts with us. You know, so somebody who bridges that animal human space would be quite interesting. This one in Japan that I can't mention until the press release comes out, they would be another, but companies like that would be ideal. We are B2B, you know. Purina wants to take it to consumers. I have no interest in dealing with consumers. Please don't take offense to that, but they're just a pain in the butt to deal with. And ours is a clinical solution, not a, you know, a consumer sort of solution.
What does OHG stand for?
One Health Group.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. All right, well, we got started a little late, but we made up time, and you made some connections of people who want to follow up with you. So I call this a success. Al, thank you. I know you had to rearrange a few things to make this happen. And if you are available this time next week, this time being 11 a.m., Andre will be talking at length about the device he brought to market. So that may be of interest for you. It's the same thing. That's it for today, everyone. I will see you this time next week.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Bye-bye.